So as far as building teams, this is my experience. As I mentioned, I had a large team, 120 kids. My biggest challenge, and if you know anything about me, is I have a very hard time sitting watching people on a team, or maybe I'm working on a project with someone. I hate when people are sitting around doing nothing. It drives me nuts. And so I'm always trying to find ways to get the students involved. And so I'm going to be sharing my ideas with you. As I said, I had 120 kids and one robot to build. So some of the things I share with you might not apply because you only have 4 kids and you can't spread them thin. But for those of you that had 10, 15, 20 kids and just one robot, here's some strategies you can think of. I also want you to think about things that are make your life and your job easier, and things that I always talk about. I just remember my first day of teaching, my boss told me, don't smile or show your teeth until fall break. And I was like, I didn't understand it. And like the first day of class, the kids come in, I'm like, hey guys, good morning. How's everyone doing? But basically what he was saying is, you set the expectations of being kind of more of a hard ass in the beginning, that it's a lot easier to be nicer after fall break. You set the tone early, and it's a lot easier. And the same thing works in coaching. If you set the expectations that you all need to come to practice and be actively engaged and participate and help, it's a lot easier than halfway through the season, be like, why aren't you doing anything? And they're like, I haven't done anything this entire season. Why are you telling me now? So anyway, these are types of things I'll talk about. But I put this quote on here. This is something I know that was like on my middle school football t-shirt that our coach, was Manspeaker, Mr. Manspeaker, Coach Manspeaker had on our shirts, that basically would say that, we don't completely start over. We are going to reload. We don't rebuild, we reload. And this is a strategy, especially for those of you that are going into your second year, or for those of you that are just using a single grade level. Consider opening up to multiple grade levels. And why I think that could be helpful for you is because if every single year you have brand new kids, now you have to teach them what is robotics. And in my mind, this is just like coaching. It takes a full year of forming a team all the way to your first competition to understand what the heck this all means. So for the kids that can go through a full season, they are so much more knowledgeable that they can help mentor the younger kids. And in fact, what I would do is I would take I usually call them the veterans and the rookies. I would take my veteran kids in the early preseason before we actually have competition or build season starts, and I would sit them down and talk with them and say, I need to rely on you as my leaders of this team to help mentor the new coming rookies. And you need to set that, going back to setting the tone and expectations, you need to tell them early on that you are not here to show off how awesome you are and make them feel silly and stupid and like they don't know anything, because you were all them last year. You were all clueless. So you need to look at them as leaders and little tiny assistant coaches to you, helping support, showing what do we do in a daily routine and our practices. What is the right expectations, the right way to talk to one another. And that's obviously where bullying comes in. You're older than these younger kids. If you're 5th graders working with 3rd graders, I don't want to hear any 5th graders, mocking or teasing or making fun of the 3rd graders. You want to be the older brother that supports them, not the older brother that picks on them. So anyway, just think of that for next year when you start forming your team of having newcomers come in. Especially if you're a 5th grader and you just lost all your kids to 6th grade, which some of you will be in that boat. It's great to get that experience. Now, middle schoolers, and this is what's great about having a middle school, especially an elementary that feeds into it, you're going to have students that are in elementary that moving into your school, they're like, I already have experience and I'm ready to move on to the advanced stuff. You're setting up pretty nice to get those kids. So make sure if you're in a middle school that you find out who those elementary kids and seek them out to be on your team. I did have my students sign a contract. I held on to those contracts, and if the team was goofing off or an individual was goofing off, I would pull that out of file and show them, this is what we went over in the beginning of the year, and you're not contributing to that. So if anyone has any good contracts, I asked if anyone had, I think I asked you guys for someone already emailed them to me. So if you have any good contracts you guys want, send them to me and I'll throw them in the folder that you guys can all see them. I'll see if I still have my old contracts somewhere and I'll try to put them on there. But mine were you must attend 80% of the meetings. And we talked about being an actively attending versus just attending. You need to actively attend the meetings. And I've talked to, I was just talking at lunch with some of the coaches of saying, if you're not doing anything at a meeting, I will kick you out. I will ask you to leave, and that doesn't count as you being present at that meeting. So I definitely have a different personality as a coach as I do as a classroom. As a coach, it's like a business. You have the job to do, and if you don't want to be on my staff, you're out. Like, get out of here. Not that coaching can't be fun, but you set that expectations of when you are here, you're here to work and contribute on the team. And you need to kind of play a part and play your role. Out of any professional world, if you can't make a practice, make sure your students are a handwritten note. I cannot make it to practice. I don't care if they're first graders. Write a note. Sally can't make it to practice on Tuesday. They give it to you, and out of courtesy, if they are a programmer, they should go tell the other programmers on the team, I can't make it tonight, here are my files, or here's what I was going to work on, so that those programmers aren't screwed the rest of the practice because Sally couldn't make it. So that's something I always would tell my teams, tell your sub-teams what you were going to do at practice if you were going to miss a practice, and you needed to let me know of it. So we talked about excused absences and unexcused. You don't need to go that deep into it, but 80% is what I would hold. Must make a particular GPA or all classes. Mine was every class needed to be a C or better in every single class, and I would do progress checks. I know it's kind of hard to do mid-year. I know especially in elementary, we don't always, the letter grades are kind of tricky because you might only have 2 assignments in and they forgot one of them, they have an F, but they just were absent and whatever, for whatever reason. So it's hard to do mid-season, I might use report cards to judge if you were going to be a driver or you're going to travel with the team. It's kind of up to you how you want to do it. I remind students we're here at school to get an education. Robotics is not a right, it's a privilege. You're here to learn, and robotics is a form of learning, but it's the fun stuff, and you have to earn your way here by doing those, getting the great grades to earn your way here. And I've already mentioned if you don't meet those expectations, I would require to get that 80% attendance. If you don't meet the grades, we don't want to kick those kids out. We want them to be at practice, but they're going to be doing their homework in the corner. And I've already kind of mentioned my talk about that. Respect. So that's a huge thing for me, and I think that as teachers this is easy because we deal with this a lot. But for those of you that aren't in the classroom every day and working with kids, it's just you need to make sure that these kids respect each other. Kids can be pretty nasty, especially in a competitive world when there's like winning and losing involved. If you ever hear, you suck, I'm a better driver than you, it's like, no, stop that. Like, you need to stop that right then and there. And there's times when it's an individual thing, or it's times where I will call them out in front of the team and say, that is not how we behave in here, so that everyone hears it. I'm not going to go too much into that, but also in respecting equipment, I will never let a kid slam his remote on the ground because he's pissed off. If he does, he is picking that up, he's going to put it back, and he's not touching that remote for the next whatever. Like, we will set an example that we don't get frustrated and throw the parts or throw the parts on the ground. Like, that's just an expectation that I always would make. Other one is team effort, making sure, and I talked about this, of how everyone on the team should be contributing. And I always would talk, what did you do today to help the team? And I'm going to go into some of my daily routine, but that's what the objectives on the board would help us with, is what are you supposed to be working on right now? And then I don't let kids quit either. So I know this is hard to do, but if a kid said, this is too hard, this isn't for me, you're going to stick through it. And I think it's something my mom made me do. I did roller hockey, and I was awesome on the block. And I was like the best kid. It was because I was older than all the other little kids, and they couldn't rollerblade. And then I joined the city hockey tournament, And it was all these junior Irish kids that are amazing, and they kicked my butt, and they knocked me down, and I was like, for like the first game when I was getting tripped and shoved, and I wanted to quit, and I'm crying. My mom's like, no, you're doing this till the end. And I had like the cheap garage sale equipment. I was like Mighty Ducks playing with, you know, the awesome people. And I learned a lot from that. I mean, I learned that if you make a commitment, you're going through and you're going to finish that commitment. And it sucked and it sucked it up, but it's a hard lesson to learn. So I don't let kids quit. If it's not for them, they'll figure it out at the end of the season. But if they make a contribution or a commitment to the team, they're going to see that out. And also just on a robot, if they get frustrated, I mean, this happens, we know, they get upset and they get frustrated. We can't let kids just stop. This is too hard. This is too hard of a game. No, like, let them take a break and walk away. You know, you guys have little clever ideas. I've seen people like, I've heard coaches or teachers give a kid a kickball and go in the gym and kick that as hard as they can a couple times until they get their energy out. It's a weird thing, but it just seems funny to watch this kid kick a kickball in an empty gym and then come back in, I'm ready to build my robot. But come up with a way to let them, you know, let out the frustration before, you know, damaging a robot. But going back to, I really don't like kids giving up. They give up so easy now, it seems, unfortunately. I sound like an old man looking at these kids nowadays give up so easy. But this isn't easy. And this is what I said at the beginning of this seminar. Some of you in your second and third year are going to see teams, and I'm going to pick on Heritage Christian. You're going to see teams like Heritage Christian with these amazing robots. But you saw, I mean, Dane is the one building these robots. Like, Paul is showing him things to do, and he's got an engineering background. But you're going to see these teams that get all mad and discouraged, and they want to give up because you have these awesome teams. You shouldn't expect, they've been doing this for years. Dean, how many years have you been on a team? This is 4th year. It's like people getting upset at LeBron and Tom Brady. They're so good. Yeah, because they practice all the time. They earn that talent. And so I think a lot of teams get frustrated that we'll never get that good. Well, this is your first year. This is maybe your second year. Yeah, but we just haven't gotten to state. Well, like, who cares? Like, that's not what we're trying to do. So anyway, I think I talked a lot about just that one bullet point, but I think it's an important thing. This is what I would do in my daily routines. Again, I would have student leaders lead all of this, which is a lot to ask of, I think, elementary kids, but middle school, you can have leaders that are in charge of what you're going to do and accomplish in that practice. I would rely on my students to do this, but I think it's a lot for elementary. I like to come up with what are some, whatever your schedule is, let's say you're going to have 10 weeks of practice. Well, week 10 is competition. So week 9, in my opinion, that last week before competition, and I work backwards, I would say we're done building the robot and we're now driving. And that's an ideal world. It doesn't always happen. But it's a nice thing to say we're done redesigning the robot, we're driving all the last week. And then week 8, where should we be back all the way to the beginning? So your first few steps, like I said, of practice is let's come up with the rules for the game. Let's come up with the strategies on how to play and score. Let's build the flex spot, and let's now redesign it. Those are your first steps of the practice. But each day, put realistic goals of what you need to accomplish and what you need to do. And I don't know if it was Paul or Steve brought up of, as a coach, you need to identify the calendar of, if you have 6 weeks and you're still on step 20 of the flex spot, something needs to change. We need to fix it and make that adjustment somehow, because those kids will continue to keep working and working and working for 10 weeks and be like, as a coach or an adult, you need to identify we can't be doing the same thing for 10 weeks. We need to move on. We need to figure out a new strategy to solve that. So I'll put on the board that we need to get, if flex is 60 steps, we need the first 20 in the first practice. We need the next 20 in the next practice. And the next one, that's 3 weeks of flex bot, building, whatever it might be. I put those goals out there, and I put people's student names at the beginning. We'll say, who wants to do this? And if not, I'm putting names on there of 3 or 4 students, and then on the next one, we want to build the field. That might take 2 or 3 practices. Put names under there. then as a coach, I'm not building this robot, I'm not building this field, I'm floating around going, hey, what are you supposed to be doing right now? We look at the board, he's supposed to be building the field, he's sitting around twiddling his thumbs, we'll say, is the field built yet? No, then you need to be helping supporting your team. Is the field built yet? Yes, then what else can we be working on? And then you say, I shouldn't be telling you what things need to be done. You can be helping getting parts for the people that are building the robot. What else on that board isn't done? What other things can we be working on? So that really helps putting it somewhere that they can see what needs to be done. And then what that helps is at the end of your practice, what I'll do, if you have an hour and a half practices, which is the time I think is good for the little ones, the elementary, you can maybe stretch that to 2 hours during middle school if you wanted to. But a lot of these kids, at the end of the day, they're pretty exhausted. So an hour and a half is the sweet spot number that I've found. Give yourself at least 5 minutes at the end of the day to go back to that board to say, how did we do? We were supposed to get to 20 steps, you got to 18, not bad. We update our objectives for tomorrow. We write tomorrow's or next practice's objective at the end of that practice. That's a great way to kind of bring everyone together. Too often I've seen practices go like this. Practice starts at 3:30, teacher's still kind of wrapping up the day, kids get the robots out, they're starting to build, and then an hour and a half goes by, and the coach hasn't even stopped, hasn't even talked, they're just kind of doing their own thing, and then it's like, oh, shoot, it's time to clean up, and get out of here. And throughout that, some kids are coming in, some kids are leaving, no, you're here at the time, the practice starts, teachers should go over the objectives, break out the assignments, and then clean up time, wrap up time. Maybe that's your journal time too, but that's kind of where the way I would work it. I do stop the entire team for major breakthroughs or necessary discussions. Most of the time they're sub-teams working individually, but I will stop and say, hey, here's a major breakthrough, why don't you guys come to the field, look at what we discovered. It's a great way to praise a student or a sub-team's kind of accomplishment. It's an opportunity to maybe do some brainstorming. And that's what I was saying, if there's allow enough time at the end to regroup and discuss progress. Any questions about kind of a daily routine of practice? Wonderful. Now, this is not ideal. This is something that I did over the years. It took me almost 6 years to get to this point where, one, we had financial support to be able to create 2 robots. 2, I started learning from the best teams in the world on what they did, and I learned that this is a neat strategy. So this is advanced, and it might not apply to any of you, so I'm sorry if you're like, there's just no way in heck I can do this. I understand. But we would have a practice robot that we would manipulate, play, modify, and then it had to be proven to work on that practice bot before we made it to the competition bot, which is our final robot. And as we wanted to make changes, we kept the comp bot and went back to the practice bot, and that was our way to tinker with it. So if you have the ability, the funds, and the time, that's a great little thing to do, but now you're building 2 flex bots and modifying both of them, and it's an extra step. But for those of you that have been doing this for 3 or 4 years and you're ready to get more advanced, I don't even know if Heritage Christian, do you guys do 2 like that?
No, a lot of times if a team decides to build a new robot, they will leave their existing robot and build a second robot, and at some point they'll decide that robot is going to be their new primary robot and either tear apart or set aside. So we do have teams that will be working on 2 robots at one time, but they're never the same robot. It's an evolution or a complete rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, there's teams that, my boss coaches at Sidner Academy at Keystone and Kessler, it's IPS school, and she has like 4 middle school teams all working together, and so they have 4 versions of robots, and then they compete, they practice, they work together, and as a team, they will say, you know what, I like this one the best, and the other 3 or 2 groups might decide to kind of morph theirs into that design. So that's an opportunity or a way where you can actually have 2 robots designed by 2 different teams and then say, hey, you know what, I like this design, I'm going to go with that, and they share ideas. You can do that. I mean, that's another kind of way to see what worked better, what path one team took and got more points with it. You lose kind of ownership because when you have two separate teams, you kind of want to make them feel like that's their robot. They have ownership of that, so that's another thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of it's a thing that you could do. You don't have to do if you have the opportunity and resources. It's an idea.
Right.
We did that.
We see a lot of teams. Sorry. We see a lot of teams at some competitions where they'll show up with 4 teams and they all have the exact same 4 robot.
Yep.
Clearly, all 4 teams didn't come with the same robot. So I always encourage people, if you've got a team that says, our robot didn't work, we went down a path, it's just terrible, we like Team A's, the way they did that, encourage them to come up with some derivations of it. Say, well, Team A's isn't perfect, it gets hung up a little bit here, maybe it was a little narrower, so you can make a better, improved version of Team A's.
Yep.
Don't just clone somebody else's design.
Take
Their design ideas and make something better.
What I told most of you as first-year teachers is I think there's a difference between copying and being inspired. I never support copying, which would be taking a picture or on YouTube or copying part for part, beam for beam, spot for spot, an identical clone. But inspired of, oh my gosh, I didn't think of picking up through the center. Oh my gosh, I didn't think of extending that arm so that you can reach on the top. And that's what happens you see at competitions. You go to competitions in the early season, there's 30 teams, there's 30 different robots. By the end of the season, there's 30 teams, there's 5 versions of robots. It's because people have been inspired by designs, not necessarily stealing designs. And we got coaches be ethical on, making sure kids aren't copying. Was there another question?
No, I was just going to comment. I like the idea of the practice spot and competition spot. We did try that towards the end of the year, trying to make ourselves better, and I thought it worked. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't apply to you guys exactly, but one thing I didn't realize why people got so much practice in first robotics in the high school levels, after 6 weeks of building, you have to actually put a bag and tag your robot. You can't touch it till the competition. And sometimes we weren't done with our robot on that week 6, so then you would fall back on your practice spot. So I didn't realize how these teams are so dang good, and they're like, oh, we have a second robot at the school that we're building. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it's more high school, high level stuff that doesn't necessarily apply to you, but I'm taking those same concepts of showing you a way that you could apply it. So supporting girls to join your team, again, I didn't want to get into this big debate of why it's valuable to put girls on a team. But it is pretty obvious for those of you that teach tech ed as an elective where students have to choose to take your class. Just very quick on that. Girls are not choosing our courses because they don't think they're good at it. They don't see women in these fields. And if you can get mentors supporting your team that are female, the girls are going to see, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that there are girl programmers. Yes, there are. I did not realize that there are engineers that are female. And so students tend to want to be teachers because they see you being awesome and all the time, and so they want to be people they see all the time and that do amazing things. So that's a compliment if a student of yours wants to be a teacher because they think you're awesome. But that's what's happening when they start seeing a lot of engineers as males, and they're like, well, women can't do that, or girls can't do that. So people have asked me, how do I get more girls on my team? One is see if you can find parents that are female, that maybe have a small technical background that will help inspire the girls. I've already told you about the Girl Power Grant, and that's another opportunity. We'll email you all out so that you have that information to apply for. It's a 2-step process. It's applying through RAC's website, getting the grant, which will give you the super kit. Then they're going to ask you to register and pay the $100 second registration fee. That's where Bree and I will send you information on how to get paid. And that's actually through our IWIT partnership, where Guggenheim Life and Annuity now has a nonprofit of Indianapolis Women in Tech. They're trying to get more girls on teams, so that's another way. But I've also found, I started with, I had 30 kids on my team and 1 girl. And by the time I was leaving, I had 120 kids and about 40 girls on my team. And my strategies that really helped me is I had the girls be the leaders, girls be the drivers. Anytime I was printing off a flyer or putting something on our website, girls are front and center, showing that girls are on this team leading and can be successful. This is not a boys-only team. So putting them front and center, putting them on any kind of advertising, putting them and showing them that they can be all-star driver. And then I've already told you the mentor part of getting female mentors. Yeah.
If you have more than one new team that is girls, do
Mm-hmm.
you apply for each of those teams?
I don't know how that works.
Because we have an all-girls middle school team now that we're starting this year, and then we have an elementary school team that's over 50% girls. That is a new team also, so that's why I was.
If it's at the elementary and the middle, if those are two separate, I bet you could. If it was a team 2 and 3, maybe not. But if it's elementary and middle, I bet you could.
Okay.
I don't know. REC manages that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. Go for it. Just do it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is where it goes into what I'll call subdivisions. So I had 120 kids, and I did, surprisingly, in the early years actually, when I divided them up into subdivisions, everyone wanted to build a robot. And then there was a turn maybe about 5 years ago where with 100, we'll say 100 kids, 20 of them, maybe 15 wanted to be builders, and 30 to 40 of them wanted to be programmers. And so like 5 years ago that started switching and changing. As we all know, we can't get all the kids to touch the robot or all the kids to program the robot. And so you're gonna have to kind of break them down. I don't call them divisions because they're still part of the team. They're sub-teams. Okay, they're still part of the team, but there are going to be your students that are hands-on or the builders. I kind of break the builders up into designers and prototypers, and then the actual builders. So the easy example would be on the practice spot. The people that have the ideas all the time that want to change and make modifications, they're taking the extra parts and they're coming up with a new lifting mechanism that fits and plays this year's game. And it can fit and adapt on that robot. So instead of rebuilding the robot, they're just taking it off the little pegs, those little arms, and they're putting new ones on. And now the builder is the one that knows everything about this robot, how to put it together, when the part breaks, how to fix it. I was a digital electronics teacher, and we'd get these circuits that were really long and big, and my kids invented a game that I started teasing kids with called Wire Hunt. So there's like 100 wires, you pull one out and say, you gotta fix your circuit. You can almost do the same thing for your builders, is you can go over and not intentionally break it, but like, hey, what happens if, take this apart, what if this happens during a competition, how do you put that together? Your builders, which are typically going to be your drivers, should know how that comes back together. And then where the designers come in, they're the ones that have the new ideas, and they're designing, prototyping, things like that. But another resource that I think is valuable, and you just have to figure out how this works for elementary kids, if it's appropriate or not. But YouTube, I mean, like Heritage Christian had a summer camp of this year's game, building robots, and I was just watching, going down the YouTube rabbit hole of watching videos of what are the strategies that are working, how many can you reasonably stack, how much time does it take to hang. You can pick these things up from YouTube, and now that there's, they released the game, people are doing this all summer long, and that's which is really neat. You can have kids start looking at videos of unique, different ways to pick up pick up the hubs, and different unique ways to design the robots. And again, that goes back into if you have the kids pause YouTube and build it brick for brick, that's copying. But if you see unique ways, and I think of hanging that way, that's being inspired. So you could have a group of students that are just your designers, that are coming up with prototyping, they're looking on YouTube, they're looking for new ways. I did this might not always apply, but if there's people that always have new ideas, I made them sketch it out, measure it, get the proper measurements, build it, test it, and before it went on the final product, they had to present it to the team, and the team had to decide, or at least the build team, to decide if that's going to go on the final product. I know in an ideal world, that's the great way to do it. Things happen so fast sometimes with the little ones that they just grab it, put it on, take it apart, and it's on there before you know it. But that was the ideal kind of the formal engineering kind of design process that we came up with and that way everyone kind of had a buy-in on how it all worked. Before kids in the beginning of practice, we had 1 claw, and now we turn around and we have 3 claws, or something like crazy. And you're like, when did that happen? That also helps when you have that kind of summary at the end of practice to talk about modification, updates, and changes. So people that have been programming in front of the laptop all day know what your changes are. That's another way to bring it back in. As far as drivers go, people ask the question all the time, how do we select our drivers? I know Sam already talked a little bit about it. In my early days, wanted to make sure that everyone that wanted to drive got an opportunity to drive. And skills is another great time to put those kids that maybe aren't as great, put them on the skills if you want. But still, skills, as we have already said, can be a valuable way to get into state and to worlds. But as we've already also said, it's not all about getting to state and to worlds. So some things that you can do is just make sure that the kids are practicing as often as they can on the field during practice, not at competitions. In that 10-week, if you have 10 weeks that you're going at, and what would typically happens you guys are practicing once a week, and then week 8 you're practicing 2 or 3 times a week, and then week 9 and 10 you're like, school's canceled, we're doing robot practice, we don't have enough time, it's all falling apart. That's okay and all, as I said, this is hard, try to not touch your robot anymore at the end, and make sure your drivers have plenty of opportunities to drive in that last week. Don't make modifications, because every time you make a modification, the drivers have to learn a new way to drive it. And then going back to, I'm off on a tangent with this on the drivers and selecting drivers, but making sure the kids are doing those basketball free throw shots. Pick up, drop, pick up, drop, pick up, drop. All right, now pick place, pick place, pick place, pick place. All right, drive, hang, drive, hang. Just doing those simple things until you get to the end where they feel confident they can do those. Then you're going to start doing, all right, do the first 30 seconds. All right, do the first 30 seconds again. All right, now do your handoff so that you do a full minute with the other person. All right, we have 2 teams here. Let's do an actual practice run and see how it works out. I think some people just carelessly just let the kids drive around and do whatever they want. That's okay sometimes. I think to start getting a little more competitive and structured, you want to start going through those drills like you would in sports so that they get that muscle memory of how to pick up something cleanly, clearly, especially when the robot's now facing you backwards and they're reversing those controls. But anyway, here's how I would select drivers is I would say if you're going to 3 competitions or 2 competitions in the year, I would let all the kids that want to drive at that first competition drive. And what you might want to do is pair them up in sets. So you have 6 kids that want to drive, you have 8 matches typically at your competition. So if you have 6 kids, this is a set of 2, this is a set of 2, and this is a set of 2. This is your opener, this is your closer. Your kids are going to decide, are you going to be the opener, closer? And at least set those guidelines so they have a plan going into it, knowing that this kid's always hanging because he's practiced hanging and that's what they do. This guy is really good at picking and placing or round, whatever it might be. And then at your competition, allow that all 6 of those kids drive. So you're going to drive 2 matches, 2 matches, 2 matches, or 1, 1, 1. And then when you get to the finals, you can decide whoever has the highest score of those 3 sets is going to be the one that drives in the finals. That's something a lot of teams have done. And then if you, for example, make it to state, then you dwindle that down to, all right, we're just going to take 2 sets. These 2 and these 2 are going to drive, and whoever's the best in qualifying is going to drive in the finals. And then that way, maybe I'm just, maybe that way that they're self-selecting who the best driver is. And I know, again, it contradicts saying, well, we want to make sure everyone's having fun. But at some point, you're going to have to just say they're the better driver, they're going to go. Because part of me will argue, and again, I'm going in circles on this, part of me will argue that you do kind of owe it to your team to make sure that you have the best driver out there doing the best that robot was designed to do. Like, I think you kind of owe that to your team. But in that progression, looking at the overall season, if you let everyone drive that first one, you got your fairness there. The second one, they kind of competed against each other. Now at state, you've got your best drive team going, the A team, B team. Yeah?
We kind of had that at Worlds. We had our 4 drivers on our elementary team, and they would go back and forth. 2 would start and another, and they would hopscotch.
Yeah.
And then when it came down to the final drive for us, we kind of switched, and we said, this person's been the most consistent on this team. And they had a partner who was kind of, the stress was getting to them.
Yeah.
And this person over here was being consistent and really So we just said, hey, for these last 2 matches, we're gonna kind of mix things up.
Yep.
You know, hey, we're worlds, let's just have fun. And that last drive, we actually had our 2 best
I like that.
drivers on.
And you're a coach. I mean, you can make those hard calls, like those tough decisions. I mean, that's your job. That's your Bill Belichick strategy of figuring out what's going to work best for the team. And yeah, make those tough calls. That's absolutely appropriate, I think. As far as programming goes, it sounds like some of you have limited options on programming and laptops. So I do think that's something that you're going to have to make sure you share, making sure the kids are sharing, those that do want to program. It's hard to get multiple people program, but if you have, let's say in an ideal world, 3 kids want to program, you have 3 laptops, you have 1 robot, what those 3 kids can be working on is your 3 different codes. Your one code is the push and corral, your another one is the pick and place, and your third one is the go and hang. And you might want to allow the kids to find, you might want to allow the kids to figure out times they can interject and download the code, as long as it's not interfering with the kids that are building. Or you might just say, if you have an hour and a half practice, at 45 minutes, programmers get it for 10, or programs get it for 15. And you put that on the time on the board that they know the builder's gonna have to stop touching it at 45 minutes in. Programmers get it for 15 minutes, they're gonna download their code, put it on there, test it, and then they're gonna spend the rest of practice fixing and adjusting. So, and then the programmers know that they have 45 minutes and they need to use that 15 minutes very efficiently. So those are just things, and I know these two sometimes clash. I know at least they did on my team. It's the chicken and the egg kind of thing of, the programmers are more important because you can't get a autonomous mode without a programmer. You're like, yeah, you can't build you can't do a skills autonomous without a robot. So we need more time building. We need more time programming. It's kind of who's more important. Well, they both are, but they need to work together. I have a team that is, this is usually the kid that can't focus, is the one that's going to build this field and keep it maintained and reset it all the time. And then I also call that kid usually the info junkie, because when they don't have anything to do, they're looking at rule updates, they're looking at rules, and when you say, hey, when it's leaning on the wall, what's the ruling? Not only do they tell me, they need to tell me what rule and show me. And then I use my whole engineering, or my teacher side of me that said, when you don't know something, you'll ask the info junkie when you don't know the answer, and be like, what does happen when a hub falls out of bounds? Can you show me what happens? Like, show them, and then now you know. But like, use that, I call info junkie for the field, and so they're the field or rules guru. Again, this is for a bigger team. This is going to be, I know a lot of parents do this for you, but a PR would be, your PR team would be someone that's designing t-shirts, someone that is coming up with your logo. But I think you can now, as a second or third year, and this is going to bleed into the fundraising side of things, is I think you can be getting into now putting presentations together for possible school board principals to come in if you haven't done that yet, and also to give presentations to outside donors to come in and learn more about your team. This is a wonderful, wonderful way to get kids more confident and have the ability to communicate to other students at the competition, the judges at the competition. But again, going back to these real world applications, I mean, if you have an elementary kid that can actually speak to the superintendent of schools of your school district, I mean, most of them don't even know who the heck that person is. And here they're giving presentations and asking for $1,000 and like killing it. Like, that's awesome. That's a really cool experience. So I think a PR team, to me, can be a team that puts together these presentations and brings in awareness about your program and helps recruit funding and does the branding with logos and t-shirts. And maybe this is so cool. I know some of you guys are there and some of you guys are not yet. One thing I like about teams, and Heritage Christian's very clear, because every time their parents come, they're all wearing the t-shirts. Now, not all of your parents are going to be able to afford t-shirts, but when they come to competition, brand your team. Like, all the parents, get them to buy into that team. The principal should be wearing your team t-shirt the day that you go before a competition. So I was going to say, one thing that was really cool that I didn't even realize was happening, and now I'm like, I wonder how often this is happening in other schools. There was a team here in Indianapolis that the robot just literally almost, other than blew up, days before state. Like, it just was not working. Got a call from coach in a panic, crying, like, it won't work, can't figure it out. I already talked to Paul, I already talked to Randy, I already talked to all these people, and we can't figure out solutions on the phone. Is there any way you can come in? And normally I would not make a, but it was like 20 minutes down the road. I'm like, I can come. So I came to this school, and as immediately as I walked in, and this goes into the PR and fundraising and kind of image of your program. As soon as I walked into the school, their trophy was in the main office. The secretary that greeted me is wearing the team shirt. The principal comes out and is like, oh, are you the robot help? Thank goodness. They're really they are aware of their problem with the robot, and he, of course, is wearing the team shirt. I go out in the hallway, and there are, because this is days before state, there are streamers of the team, and as I walk down the hallway, every teacher in that building was wearing the robot shirt. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so this story even gets better. I'm helping the team out, and they have a robot room, and this is another cool thing. If your school has an abandoned, empty school classroom that you're not using, make that the robot room. That is your room now. Let's just think about it. Ask the principal, do we have any abandoned classrooms that we're not using? That's where your field will stay. That's where your room is. A lot of schools have those now. That's awesome. If you've got a basketball court, why not have a robot house? So I'm helping. We're working with the kids, trying to get this thing fixed. I'm walking out, bell rings. I try to leave before all the kiddos, kind of getting swarmed and swamped, and the parents in the parking lot can't get out of school. I'm trying to beat the bell, and I miss it. Bell rings. Principal gets on announcements and dismisses the students on the robotics team first, and has all the kids out in the hallway high-fiving them as they walk out the door like a little pep rally, and shaking, like clapping as they go to state. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, is this the culture at all the schools? And I don't know if it is, but like, it should be. And I'm on a soapbox right now, but we have at high school levels, if your football team wins a game or whatever, you get a pep rally. You get homecoming, whole school combo for it. You guys should be doing the same thing for your robotics team. Like, it's just as important, if not more, on your robotics team. So you should treat it as such. So I know t-shirts cost money. I know that the branding costs money, but you should have a PR team to start kind of thinking about these teams. How can we bring awareness of our robotics team with t-shirts and with flyers and buttons and stickers that we can put on the teacher cars and with their permission. But just things like this, I think, that are very little that will help overall, because you bring awareness and support in the community, and then you start getting more things that will help you, like volunteers and money and volunteers for your team and volunteers for those that want to host events and things like that. So anyway, I'm at my time. I want you to ask, I know I went on tangents here, but what kind of questions, other questions do you guys have about it? Yeah.
I had a couple things that I wanted to add.
Please do.
Awesome. So, one of the things that we talked about earlier, grouping the students. One of the challenges, well, of course, during the season, and this may be something you don't think about a lot, if you have multiple teams, you don't necessarily, according to REC, you don't have to have a student tied to one team. So it is legal for them to switch from team to team. The thing that you want to avoid is taking your awesome driver who just won the tournament and putting him on team B so they can win the next tournament, right? That's not really fair, it's not really against rules, but it's frowned upon if that comes up, that happened. But if you find during the season that these two kids aren't getting along, it's perfectly okay to move that one to another team where he may get along better, where things will work out better for everybody. That's something that a lot of people don't think about. It's like, well, we started with this team. Well, you know, I know we're trying to do that, but you can, if you need to, move students. Sometimes these all have the band competition that weekend, and there's only one kid that can go to the tournament. Well, it's okay to take one from one of the other teams, put them on that team so that they can both teams can actually have enough students to compete at the tournament. That's all right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Another thing that we have, I had a couple people ask about this, from one season to the next. The first thing that I tell the kids at the start of the season is, I'm going to pick the teams. I'm going to choose who's on your team and how things go together. What I will usually do is take input from the kids. See, last season, those two kids worked together really well. Kid number 3 on that team wasn't included in anything. So I'm going to find a different way to group him. And that, again, is sort of up to you. I know a lot of coaches will have the kids say, I want these kids on my team. And I'll kind of do that, but then I'll say, I'm still going to pick the teams. So, amongst other things then, this guy can't get mad because his friend didn't want him on the team. Well, it's not really up to them. It's up to me as the coach to say, this is how the groups are together. So the kids aren't going to have bad feelings against each other. I'm okay if they have bad feelings against me. It's not going to make a whole lot of difference down the road. But these kids are probably going to be together for a few years. You don't want them mad at each other for that.
I hold tryouts for 2 days, and before tryouts, I have my captains already picked. And what I do is I give them a clipboard, and they get to know they're in charge of a station, and they get to know the kids, and they make notes of kids that they want on their team. And then the time that everybody else is sitting at study tables, I bring the captains in, and they draft their team. But I start with, you have to start with an 8th grader. Then you go, your next pick has to be a 7th grader. Then your next pick has to be a 6th grader. And then we cycle through with each team, and that's how the teams are built. They may not get their first choice if somebody else has picked them, but they have a list of kids that they know that they want on their team. And then if I see issues with arguments, because like my son always has issues with one person because he doesn't have personality, so I only have to move somebody because of him.
I'd like to hear from you guys, Paul and those who've got large teams. We know that it takes time, years, and even on the daily, weekly schedule. What kind of time are you guys really putting in to get these kids practice on the field, first of all? You talked about once a week or something like that. We've been running twice a week. Sometimes that's a stretch because of all the external things that are going on. But what's reasonable, and what are things that you guys have been successful in accomplishing, time-wise?
What I've done at school is basically 1 hour a week, 2 or one night a week, 2 hours after school. What I found is that there's a lot of kids that are interested, and they end up getting their own kits. And then they'll do their own building at home. What I will usually let them do in that case is they can bring the robot in and show it to the other kids, but we're not going to use that one for the competition. If you want to take the ideas, if you want to talk to your team and take the ideas and try to incorporate that into your robot, that's up to you. But we're not going to have the kids building robots at home for the team. Like I say, a lot of them will build on their own with their own stuff.
Yeah, so different levels, we do different things. For elementary, we meet once a week for a couple hours. But for middle school, we meet once a week for 4 hours. We do it on Fridays because a lot of sports practices aren't on Fridays. And by doing it for 4 hours, I know it seems like a long time, we can do it right after school, and people who have 2 hour practices can come to the second 2 hours. So that allows them to do that. But inevitably, when these middle schoolers build advanced robots, which they will get to the point where they're doing, you give a kid a chance to build 7 robots or 10 robots over a couple of years, and the 10th one will be very amazing. They need more time, and so we end up having multiple day practices too. So some of our best teams that do very well at Heritage, that's a team that probably did on average 6 hours a week for the entire school year.
We typically practice 3 hours a week, and we had 5 teams last year. So it just depends on the week too. If it's right before competition, we may need an extra day.
Our typical path is the week before, we're there every day after school, kind of wrapping it up.
It's called Hell Week.
Yeah, and then when we found out we were going to Worlds, after you called me and told me, we met every day after school for that month.
So there's another dynamic, and it has to do with having the deadline being firm or soft. We have a program that has 6, 7, 8 teams, and you can only go 3 of the 4 of those teams to each event. Each event is not necessarily a hard deadline. So sometimes teams will get to the point where, hey, we're not going to be ready for our event, we're slated to be in this event, but it looks like Team C over here is ready, let's swap them out. And so having multiple teams gives you that opportunity to take an event that you're committed to going to and switch out to be a different team over there if you've got a team that's behind or needs more time.
I think for us, that would be harder because as soon as I tell the parents how much it's gonna cost, and if I say, hey, you're gonna go to 3 or 4, whatever, 5 events this year, but your kid's team's not ready, and now I'm not going to let your team go, and somebody else is going to go, they technically paid for their portion for their kid to be at that event.
There's always, well, so if we go to, you go enough events, you have to fall back the other way later in the season. Right. But yeah, I understand, and that is a concern. I always tell the parents, I have a lot of parents who like go to too many events. I love my kid being at Robotics from 3 to 7 on Friday, because not home, but I don't want them to have to go all day on Saturday to spend my day, so.
And I also want to make sure you guys aren't burning yourselves out. I mean, I want you guys to think this is a marathon and a long haul, and that's what I was saying is you're not going to be experts the first or second year of doing this, so don't really like expect to have these elaborate, crazy, we're going to win our first competition type of teams. That might take time. I would prefer, this is just me personally, the longevity of robotics in Indiana, I would make sure that you guys don't get burned out too soon. So, yeah.
Question?
Yes, I guess I want to know, do you guys then charge a fee for them to be on a robotics team?
Yes, I have to present a budget to my principal, so I decide on, I look at, as an event planner, I can see the number of events that are currently slated on the calendar, and I can go to my principal and say, this is how much it's going to cost, we're going to buy an engineering notebook, t-shirts based off of the person we've used for t-shirts for the last 5 years, and I can come up with a pretty good budget and say, this is what I'm going to charge for the students, because I cannot end the season with any money in the account because our treasurer is treasurer. We have to end the year with
So,
nothing.
in our school, you have to pay for every extra track activity. You're doing football, it costs a few $100 for equipment, something like that. For robotics, we charge, in elementary, it's $125, and for high school, it's $260.
125?
Okay.
I think for our middle school team, we charge $40. Part of that is so that the family is committed, at least a little bit, to doing it. More so than the money. You know, it's that little bit of commitment, and some are willing to write it off if they didn't
We
like
charge
it.
$100.
Yeah, I'm going up to 75 this year.
But for us, like, we're a Catholic school, so a lot of our kids participate in CYO and stuff. You know, a CYO sport like volleyball or football may only last 6 weeks, and they're paying over $100 for that. Our season ran 9 months. They're getting the biggest bang for their buck with us than they are the sports teams. And that's
absolutely
part of,
sports. Robotics
yeah,
is way better than
for us, we kind of sell it that way. And our parents have no problem saying, oh, my kid's gonna get a full school year. And we've already started meeting with our teams this year. So they're gonna get a 12-month commitment from us as coaches.
Are there public schools that charge their kids?
Yeah,
And your district is okay with that?
yeah, as long as I
Yeah, they
don't
get
have the
t-shirts.
remaining
Like,
balance.
this is the t-shirt our kids got when we went to World. We had Karen actually donate money to buy t-shirts for just Worlds. And so we had a new design made up for Worlds. But yeah.
I would never make a financial commitment a barrier for any team to join my team. I mean, I taught I usually don't say where I taught because it's a very wealthy school and people go, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, you taught at Carmel, but we never got $1 from our school. And we had a $60,000 budget. So we had to fundraise the money from outside vendors. And so people are saying, well, you don't really understand what I come from in my school corporations, but I've mentored at IPS schools and I've mentored at inner city schools in Lafayette. There are poor students, and I understand that families that can't afford $40. And so you never make that an obstacle to prevent
That
them.
was the other thing, yeah. We agreed early on that if there's some reason they couldn't pay the $40, we'd still make the spot for them.
And save us.
And
We would never turn anybody
Yeah.
down just because they couldn't pay.
Our struggle is that we're like Title I school, we're a very, very poor district, and so we have a hard time coming up with money and doing fundraisers. There's no one around us to go to. I mean, we've pretty much outsourced everything we've got around us to get money, so we've never charged them before, but now we're thinking maybe we should, we don't know how much. They really can't afford a lot, but just so that we can keep going.
Well, one thing, and we're not gonna get too much into this right now, one thing that you can do is run a tournament. Because you'll get $30 a team for all the teams that show up.
well,
And
you get 25.
whatever, you get some money from every team that shows up. And so, along with the grant, they'll give you the parts to.
Concession sales, we make more concession.
Oh, yeah, make more. Yeah, make more.
Yeah. We'll talk about it, being an event partner if you wanted to host it, because I think that you could probably raise most of the budget that you need for your annual plus some.
My only struggle with that, and because we thought about doing that, is that our, even though we're elementary school, our gym is used by middle school, high school. So it's hard to have available gym.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is having the support we need, the staff we need to be able to run it.
Yeah, and you're gonna rely mostly on volunteers. We'll talk about event partner at the very end. I kinda wanna get back on schedule here, because I wanna get you guys out of here, because I know you have some long drives.
I got one last thing.
Yep.
Sam mentioned having an 8th, 7th, and 6th grader on the team. That's kind of how you want to cut your own pie. I've always done it so that we've had an 8th grade team or two, and a 7th grade team, and the new incoming 6th grade team, who not going to do that great, but they're going to get to see what the other teams are doing. That's kind of up to you again, how you want to divide the students up. Whether you do it so that there's one from each grade on the team, or group them by the grade, and you can kind of keep that. I've tried to keep them mostly together as they move up through the grades. That way they know what to expect from their teammates.
How many do you, so like when you say, when you put together an 8th grade team, how many people would be on an 8th grade team?
I generally kept it to about 4 to 5. And you know, he's got all kinds of different subcategories, which is great, but it doesn't work for IQ. You know, we hopefully have a couple drivers, a couple builders, and a couple programmers out of those 4.
Yeah, I would recommend 4 is the minimum and 6 is the maximum.
Yeah.
The problem with 3 is it just takes one sick kid, and now you're down to 2, and then one kid's in the restroom, and it's not driving, you can't drive. So 4 should be the minimum, and 6, I think, is the
The
maximum.
average in Indiana is 12.25 kids on a team.
Yeah, we had
We
10
need
girls
more
on
robots
our
in
roll
this
team this year. I would never do that again. 10 girls on one team.
So in my opinion, if you have more kids, you need more robots.